Fear, a world problem. Introduction. Fear is a human reaction, physical, emotional, or mental, to a perceived threat, real or imagined. Fear is also an instinct of self-preservation, really useful in the world we are living in. Interestingly, fear flourishes in our beings when we start daydreaming in our minds about the lost opportunities of our past or about the future challenges we must face. This fits a very common fear, a fear of the unknown. Only in the present moment, in the here and now, we are free from fear. This process starts with poor parenting. Sociological and organizational research also suggests that individuals' fears are not solely dependent on their nature, but are also shaped by their social relations and culture, which guide their understanding of when and how much fear to feel. Gill, M.J., and Burrow, R. 2017. Politicians are notorious for using fear to manipulate the people into supporting their policies. Lupia, Menning, 2009. We have three sources of fear in our lives: an inner source, an outer source, and a source that is not of this world. The inner is mental, the outer source are our world news and mainstream media, the social media, and everything arising from our unethical societies, always sheltered by the rule of a corrupted law. Our fears are directly proportional to our attachments to a material atheistic world and inversely proportional to our faith in a spiritual world. The nature of fear. Fear does not come from God, for God is love. Where then does fear enter this world? Fear did not enter the world until Adam and Eve chose to disobey God and bite into the forbidden fruit. Once they sinned and disobeyed God, their sin created a prison of fear. As they covered their bodies and physically hid from Him, they feared His response to their sin. They feared their new awareness of sin. They became imprisoned by fear, unable to experience the freedom of their relationship with God. Leah Lively 2020 crosswalk.com. One of Satan's greatest tools to keep you from living out God's plan and purpose for your life is fear. Fear can look like a lot of things, but its greatest damage to our life is its ability to alter our decision making. Every decision you make based on fear will not be in accordance with God's will. Adam Detamore, 2015, GreenfieldReporter.com. To put it simply, fear will disappear from our lives when we manage to get rid of our own sins forever, embracing at all times the will of our Father in heaven. Fear paralyzes and destroys our health. Fear paralyzes us. It causes us to stop in our tracks. Satan plays the movie forward in our lives through fear. Fear of our future, fear for our kids, fear for our finances, our spouse, and our health. We lay in bed at night and think of all the what ifs. The devil knows it and knows it will paralyze you and cause you to not move forward into what God has for you. Adam Detamore, 2015, greenfieldreporter.com. Fear is a human emotion that is triggered by a perceived threat. However, when people live in constant fear, whether from physical dangers in their environment or threats they perceive, they can experience negative impacts in all areas of their lives and even become incapacitated. Luis de la Grande, 2016. Living in fear makes no real sense. On a purely physical level, fear lowers your vibration and actually makes you far more susceptible to the viruses you fear you might catch. The biochemical state that fear creates in your body adversely affects your immunity and increases your susceptibility to viruses and bacteria that are all around you. All emotions, including fear, are energy. When you let fear run your life, you attract to you more of whatever is it that you're afraid of. If you're afraid of illness, you will attract it. By contrast, a growing body of evidence shows that having faith that can help you stay well and thrive. Of course, the best part is that faith doesn't require a prescription. Fear attacks you and attracts what you fear most. Christian Northrup, MD, 2021. Why fear is bad for your health. drnorthrup.com. Fear and manipulation. The culture of fear we are living in. Fear is a strong emotion and it can be manipulated to persuade people into making emotional rather than reasoned choices. Nedra Weinreich, 2006, Making Fear-Based Campaigns Work. Collective fear is likely to produce an authoritarian mentality, desire for a strong leader, strict discipline, punitiveness, intolerance, xenophobia, and less democracy, according to regality theory. Fogg, A. 2017, Warlike and Peaceful Societies, the Interaction of Genes and Culture. Fear-mongering is routinely used in psychological warfare for the purpose of influencing a target population. The tactics often involves defamation of an enemy by means of smear campaigns. Sounds oddly familiar with our current situation, doesn't it? Fear and our current world hurt stage. The concept of the collective unconscious was proposed by Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, in the mid-19th century. Broadly speaking, it refers to a dimension that is beyond consciousness and that is common to the experience of all human beings. Martinez 2021. Elements from the collective unconscious can manifest among groups of people who by definition all share a connection to these elements. Groups of people can become especially receptive to specific symbols due to the historical situation they find themselves in. Progov 1953. The common importance of the collective unconscious makes people ripe for political manipulation, especially in the era of mass politics. Young, 1959. Young compared mass movements to mass psychosis, comparable to demonic possession, in which people uncritically channel conscious symbolism through the social dynamic of the mob and the leader. Progov 1953. The best way to control a populace is through fear and discord. Fear makes people stupid. The emotional panic that accompanies fear actually shuts down the prefrontal cortex, or the rational thinking part of our brains. In other words, when we're consumed by fear, we stop thinking about the herd type mentality that overshadows our world. The Mexican writer Antonio Velasco Piña in 2007 in his book The Return of the Sacred defines our current herd stage as one in which its members act only seeking the satisfaction of their elemental instincts. He affirmed that we are currently living in a world herd stage in which the most outstanding characteristic of the existing cultures on earth is that they are immersed in the mentality and behavior of the herd without becoming aware that it is precisely from this fact that most of the problems that currently affect not only to humanity but to the planet itself are emerging. Fear predators. Another concern to our health and well-being is the lack of vital energy that fear produces in every individual, and that can also be a result of the action of out of this world entities that pollute our already contaminated planetary psychic atmosphere. And yes, they are unfortunately related to Satan. Why? Because they hunt our minds as Satan does. On the same subject, and even though the previous statement may appear to be mere fantasy, let's remember the letter that the Apostle Paul of Tarsus wrote to the Ephesians. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:12, King James Version. The writer Carlos Castaneda, in his book The Active Side of the Infinity in 1988, makes mention of the teachings he received from his mentor Don Juan Matus on the predator. According to Don Juan, we have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took control of our lives, making us its docile and defenseless prisoners. Interestingly, the invasion of predators would correspond to the time in which the biblical fall of man occurred. Through the Mind, continued Castaneda in 1988, predators inoculate into the lives of human beings anything that is convenient for them, and they do it by playing with our endless self-reflection, which takes place through our habitual behaviors, our exaggerated sense of personal importance, and the internal dialogue that we constantly maintain with ourselves. This narrow margin of consciousness is where man is irremediably trapped by the mental predator. Predators, Davalos 2018 affirmed, are masters of energetic and mental manipulation. They feed on low-level energies, fear, pain, negativity, without which they would die of hunger. Our predator parasite seeks to manipulate us like cattle to create low-level energies as their food. The big benefit they get from all this is our energy. They maintain and feed from our energy and our negativity, and in this way increase their power and influence in our actions. The predator works like our smartphone or our computer that do, through their search engines, constantly spy on us and know our movements and our interests, constantly reinforcing them and making available to us alternatives compatible with our physical, mental, and emotional searches, our material ambitions, and our sensory attachments and desires. The psychological and mental atmosphere of our humanity is highly contaminated and constitutes a real feast for mental predators. It doesn't take much effort to conclude that in our current world situation and with the actual pandemic, these beings are having a feast every day with our energy. Fear or faith? There are basically two ways to live, in faith or in fear. Unfortunately, many people live in fear most of the time. At its root, all fear results from a lack of faith. Pure and simple. The only way to build the muscle of faith is to calm yourself and turn your trust over to God. This requires patience and commitment. Northrop 2021. In 2008, Dr. Burns said, the most concrete thing that neuroscience tells us is that when the fear system of the brain is active, exploratory activity and risk-taking are turned off. Exploratory activity and risk-taking are two things that sound like faith. When your fear system is active, your faith system is turned off. Following God means taking risks, and fear literally shuts down our brain's ability to live by faith. Detamore 2015. Jesus talked about fear. Fear, worry, and anxiety affect our physical health, but they also reflect our spiritual health. Our brain's responses are most influenced by our hearts and our values. Our thinking and actions reflect the spiritual condition of our hearts. Jesus taught us to examine our fear, worry, and anxiety as clues into who we worship or what we worship in any given moment. Fear is contagious, but so is faith. Fear is contagious. So is faith, so is hope, and so is love. Jesus is in control. What Jesus' reaction is really communicating is that he already knows about the storm. He is in the boat and he can feel the water. There is no reason to panic. The same truth applies to the storms that you and I go through in our lives. Jesus is with you there too. He is aware and in control. Jesus was afraid in Gethsemane, but trusted God. In his passion, he would also be separated from the Father. The intentions of Satan with fear are to break our spirit. Fear stems from what we see and feeds from what we can't see. That is why faith is the answer. Gagnon 2020. A way to manage fear. Previously, we referred three different sources that bring fear to our lives: the inner, the outer, and the one coming from the action of out of this world entities that haunt our minds. Regarding the inner source of fear in our life, our inner life, Northrop 2021 recommends first and foremost to pray. In general, there is nothing that isn't helped by prayer. It also doesn't matter what kind of prayers you use. What matters is your sincere desire to connect with the divine. About the outer source of fear for our lives that result from our interaction with the world, the author advises to be informed. She explains that living in faith does not require you to be uninformed about what is happening in the world around you. But to be truly informed these days, you must turn off the mainstream media. Dig deep and trust your inner guidance. And remember, if a source is saying exclusively that there is only one right way or only one answer to a problem, it's a narrative, not the truth. Northrop 2021. As for the source that comes from the action of out of this world entities that haunt our minds, Davos in 2018, in his electronic book The Mental Predator, presented several useful suggestions on how to protect ourselves from these attacks. He affirmed that it is imperative to cultivate mindfulness at all times, because with this quality we can manifest unconditioned thoughts and choose our intellectual activity with freedom. Right thinking has to do with living constantly and intensely in the present moment, in the here and now. Only in the eternal now God is found. Davos 2018 also quotes the writer Carlos Castaneda that in his book The Active Side of the Infinite of 1988 mentions that according to his teacher Don Juan Matus, the only way that predators do not affect us is to discipline ourselves. Discipline is their only impediment, a position of total alertness. Which is nothing other than discipline creates such conditions in our attention that we cease to be tasty for those beings. In this case, they turn around and leave us alone. The men of knowledge say, Castaneda continues, that discipline makes the shining layer of consciousness unpleasant to the predator. A bright layer of inedible consciousness is not part of their cognition, I suppose. After being baffled, they have no choice but to refrain from continued with their nefarious task. The seers of the one lineage also learned that if they restricted the mind of the predators with inner silence, the foreign installation will flee. If you keep that pressure long enough, the mind of predators flees in defeat.